Chapter 7, First Husband Blues. It is an unspoken rule in radio that jocks and salespeople don't mix. Jocks are the prima donnas who bring in the revenue, and the salespeople are the plebes who are responsible for selling the jocks. In radio, they don't ever want the salespeople to bother the jocks, the stars. Robert Morris III, not his real name, somehow subtly managed to break through. I noticed him immediately because of his size. 6'3", about 300 pounds. Solid, just the way I like my men. He was dressed in a Brooks Brothers suit and had graying hair, which I also loved because it was a sign of maturity. I bumped into him in the hallway. He knew immediately who I was and struck up a conversation. Before I went to the studio, he said, "By the way, I have this appearance that client wants you to do." He would frequently tell me about appearance opportunities, which was a big no-no. That info was to be passed from the salespeople to management to the jock. But I didn't mind. I liked talking to him. I could tell he was attracted to me. I could also tell that he probably would never ask me out. He was a little intimidated. I was a big deal in New York. I was in the top 3 in my time slot and was bringing a lot of revenue to the station. And I had a big mouth. When women are strong and carry an air of mystique sometimes, the strongest men don't want to ask you out. I was a woman who was aware of myself. I could see he was attracted. So the next time he approached me about an appearance, he said something like, "Are you busy Saturday?" I said, "Yes, I'm going out with you. You're taking me to BBQs." "Well, what about this appearance?" Robert asked. "We'll go to BBQs and you come to the appearance with me. We'll call it a date." And that was how it started. We dated silently for 8 months before we announced our engagement. Robert was exactly what I was looking for in a man at the time. He was older, nearly 40, more mature, more stable, so I thought. He was big and attractive. His only problem was his jacked up teeth, but I figured those could be fixed. He seemed to have a lot of confidence and he made me laugh. I was in my mid-20s, making about $80,000 a year, living in a small apartment in Union City that had rats and roaches. I had broken up with a famous DJ and had an abortion. I figured the only thing I hadn't done and perhaps the next phase of my life should be marriage. For some reason, I started to get very worried about my parents not being around for the important activities in my life, like me getting married. Not that they were sick or in poor health, but my futuristic vision was seeing every possible scenario, albeit far in the future. I wanted my father to be able to walk me down the aisle. I would never forgive myself if something happened to my parents, or if something happened to me and I wasn't able to fulfill this part of my dream. That's the way I was thinking then. I had the perfect career. I was making lots of money. I was rising to the top of my game. I just felt that I had to complete my circle, which meant getting married and having a child. Maybe other girls at 25 or 26 were still in the struggle to get their career together. I was beyond that and ready for the next phase of my life. Robert seemed like the perfect man to carry out my plan. He was a fraternity man like my father and brother. He got along with my family and believed in all the things my family believed in. We both came from a 2-parent household. He grew up in a well-respected Manhattan household, and I was raised in a predominantly white neighborhood in Monmouth County, New Jersey. His parents were a lot like my parents. They were never wealthy, just always lived in the right places and sent their kids to the right schools, dressed the right way, ate at the right restaurants, and vacationed at the right places. My family vacationed in Martha's Vineyard, and his went to Sag Harbor. My family traveled to the Orient by plane, and his went by the Orient Express. His parents and my parents would even get together, and we all would have champagne and caviar. We made a nice picture. He was a nice picture too. And even though I knew there was a disparaging difference in our income, I figured that it would be okay because the background checks were all right. I never thought I was too good to date down financially. Never, ever. Hell, I would date a plumber or a cab driver. I was never checking for a man's wallet. Robert, though, had the right package. He even wore custom-made shirts. with his initials on the sleeves. He had the right education. He was a Morehouse man, which I found absolutely wonderful. I loved the thought of Morehouse in Atlanta, that bastion of Black pride. What attracted me to him, what kept me attracted, is that we could talk about things other than radio stuff, like what Mary J. Blige was up to. He was a cornball, which was fine with me. I was living a fast life. I liked the slow pace he brought to my life. I was in the hip hop game, but my values were still wayside. But there were some warning signs that I should have paid attention to. I didn't realize that my family thought something was wrong with a man of his age being so available, so unattached, never been married without children. They would throw things out there and I would think, oh, you guys are crazy. I just wasn't trying to hear them. I didn't feel that Robert was a father figure. I had a father, a very good father at that. He also lived with his parents. But in New York, you sometimes forgive things you would never forgive anywhere else, like people in their 40s who don't have a driver's license. New York is expensive, and he wasn't making any money. I understood him living with his parents. So he got engaged. He asked me to marry him at one of his fraternity functions. He had already shown his boys the ring that I picked out. It was a cubic zirconia. He originally picked out a real diamond that he could afford, but it was about the size of a pinhead. I had to tell him, you know, honey, if we ever got married, I could not have a little tiny stone on my ring. I was seeing the hip hop game starting to form. People were wearing the leather medallions with Africa on them, but it was fast moving toward the bling bling. And I was Wendy from the radio. Even if I was wearing a leather African medallion and cross colors and Carl Kanai, once I said I was getting married, people would look at the engagement ring and think or say aloud, how did you do? Heck, even outside the hip hop game, women immediately looked at your ring to see what your future husband is all about. So I picked out a nice size, high quality cubic zirconia, which he presented to me at the biggest fraternity function of the year, their winter ball. We got engaged and I called my parents from the hotel room we rented at the venue in Yonkers. My parents seemed very happy. It took a year to plan the wedding. At that point, I was making enough money where I was willing to pay for the wedding myself. I was raised to believe that the woman's parents paid for the wedding, but because my parents paid for my education in full, I had a lot of guilt. I wouldn't dare make them pay for the wedding. Besides, I had excess income. My rent was cheap, my car was paid for, and my taste in clothes was cheap. Timberland, Carhartt, etc. Coke was relatively cheap too, about $30 a gram. I used about 3 grams a day, 4 days a week. So I paid for the wedding and asked my mother to plan it. I'm a girly girl, but I was never into pomp and circumstance. Actually, things like the details involved with planning a wedding make me vomit. My mom planned it. I told her I just wanted to get married in a place that wasn't common. But I wanted to get married at the Jersey Shore where I was raised, and I wanted Reverend Matthews from the Second Baptist Church, the church I was raised in, to marry us. My mom did a fabulous job. She handled everything from soup to nuts, everything except write the checks. And it was perfect. His parents even paid for the honeymoon. The only thing he paid for was the ring, which was $300. They sent us to Rio de Janeiro, and we flew first class. Everything went off without a hitch until we got on that honeymoon. We fought the entire time. He didn't like what I was wearing, or he felt like I was wearing too much makeup, or what's up with your hair? It was so petty. At one point, I remember saying, well, I'm flying back home. When we got back home, everything was fine. We kissed and made up. We flew back to an apartment that we had picked out in Jersey City in the Newport apartments because I didn't want us to move into my apartment. I wanted us to start fresh in our apartment. The place was in my name because I was making more money and I was the one with the credit history, which wasn't perfect but good enough to secure an apartment. I never got the chance to fully unpack before the fighting began again. We would fight about my hair. He liked it natural and I wanted it big, teased and popped. We fought about how I dressed. We fought about the appearances I made at clubs late at night. He had this idea that I was out partying all night and having fun. Well, I was, but I was getting paid. It was part of my job. I would have loved for him to come to the parties with me, but he had to get up early to go to work the next morning. So when I was rolling in around 3 in the morning, he was rolling over in bed getting ready to get up in a few hours. I hated his friends who were computer people, business executives, and also listeners of my show. Anytime I came around, I was Wendy from the radio, and there would be a million questions about what was going on with Whitney Houston or some other star. I was like a novelty act. They were so corny. At least Robert understood what I did for a living because he worked at a radio station, my radio station. His friends thought he married me for the glitz and the money. I could say a lot of bad shit about my ex-husband, but I know he didn't marry me for the money. In the end, he tried to sue me for the money, but he didn't marry me for the money. And I didn't marry him thinking I would be able to son him because he made so much less than I. Women son a man by disrespecting him and taking his balls. I never wanted to do that. It's hard to take command of your woman if your woman has a bossy personality and makes so much more money than you. But men have to step up. I let Robert have his balls. Yes, I let him because he didn't have them to take for himself, which was another problem. I don't care how much money you make or don't make or what your career is. A man needs to step up and be a man in his household. We fought about that too. We mainly fought about my hours and rock and roll lifestyle. There was a lot of jealousy from him. Robert was the low-level account executive getting a fraction of what I was making. I'm the popular DJ getting hundreds of dollars just from one of my appearances. I guess that hurt him. He's the account executive coming in at 7 after working a full day, and I'm the DJ coming in at 3 in the morning after a few Heinekens and some Coke. He did not have a Coke habit and didn't know about how severe mine was. The fighting was not physical but verbal, and it usually started after I came in from an appearance. It was mostly him saying, I grind all day, and all you do is sit behind a mic and party all night. That must have been the way it seemed to him. I'm making all of this money, and this whole entertainment thing requires less education. You can be an 8th grade dropout and still be successful in radio. It requires less physical time. I could sleep until noon because I was working the evening shift at KISS from 6 to 10. I was the star of the station. I was also a syndicated radio personality, so I was getting checks from all over the place. I was getting 80,000 from KISS, but I was also getting paid buku bucks from a syndicator in Japan. The Japanese who love hip hop wanted to have that radio presence from New York, and I was it back then. There was also the side money from personal appearances. My other half, though, is a guy on the grind with one of the lowest paying jobs at the station. He didn't get the big accounts, the Pepsis and the McDonald's. He had to hustle and sell the mom and pop accounts, the local car dealerships and mattress companies, which was far more work and far less pay. So looking back, I understand his anger. The frustration just got to be too much. He just couldn't take it, and the fights became more and more frequent. The final fight, who knows what it was about? But I do know that homeboy did something that I could never forgive. He spit in my face. I mean, a big honker that came from down low. And that was the last straw. I did not react terribly. I didn't curse him out and try to scratch his eyes out. I calmly called my parents, though. It was one of those fights that had me calling my best friend Lisa to come to the apartment to lend me emotional support. He pushed her out of the apartment into the hallway. He eventually left our apartment. Though and went back to his parents' house. Neither one of us was a cop caller, and at that point I was very popular on the radio. We both knew that calling the cops would be like a big blow up. And the last thing I wanted was publicity about my personal life. Bad enough that people in the building knew who I was. The picture my husband and I portrayed was as a successful DJ and her equally successful husband, except he always represented something that he truly wasn't. That had a lot to do with why my marriage ended. Misrepresenting yourself when you're in the entertainment business can become an especially frustrating proposition. You can't keep up the act forever. I was everything that I represented then and have been more so if I hadn't had to pay for two. I didn't mind that though. And I repeat for the girls reading this book, don't let finances deter you from love. But you have to see the forest for the trees. You have to understand that there's going to be a certain amount of frustration on your man's part if he doesn't have money. Not making as much as his woman can wear on the psyche of a man. And it certainly wore down my first husband's psyche because I knew he must have lost his mind to go so far as to spit in my face. I think I spent the whole night talking to my family and Lisa. He spent the whole night on the phone with his family and mine. But I had already made up my mind. I was leaving him. I knew that this was a definite decision because I saw that having children with him would only make things worse. I had seen his W-2s, if that's what you can call them when they're that low, and knew that if we continued, our financial burdens would fall on me. I was making a lot of money for that time, but I had no indication that I would survive in the game and ultimately do as well as I'm doing right now. What I was looking at was that this money was fine for me and I could handle marrying down financially. But what would happen when we added a kid or two to the mix? We had no property. I was driving that little Eagle Talon, and he was driving a beat down Volvo, the same car he was driving when I met him. I said to myself, you have to correct this picture before it gets out of hand. And correcting the situation for me was not going to a marriage counselor. I wanted it to end. The man had spit in my face. I felt like the next expression of frustration was going to be hands on physical abuse. That's what I saw coming. And thank God I got out before it came to that. My girlfriend had witnessed the fight, but I don't remember if she actually said to me, Wendy, just leave. I do remember her being very supportive. My sister suggested counseling, but she is happily married to her college sweetheart. She is also very conservative. See a marriage counselor? Well, I felt like when it's over, it's over. Some things just cannot be fixed. And when my sister suggested it, it made me mad. I felt like I was not getting the kind of support from her that I needed. I called up my parents and told them what happened, and they said, Wendy, we are behind you for whatever. I needed to know that because I was feeling like if you weren't with me, you were against me. At first, I believe I was married for the long haul, for better and worse and all of that. That's the way we were raised. My parents have been married for more than 45 years. I have never seen my father sleep on the couch or have to get a hotel room because he and my mother could not get along. I have never heard either one of them call the other out of their name and that modern day stuff that modern day couples do. Somehow, despite my parents' perfect marriage, I knew that this was not reality for all. My parents didn't teach me that it wasn't real. I just somehow knew. It must have been my futuristic vision. I always believed that divorce was an option for a reason. But 5 months? No, I expected the marriage to last longer than that. My next step after I decided this was over was to figure out the details. How was this divorce thing going down? I knew I needed an attorney, so I opened my trusty yellow pages and found a lawyer. He was a white guy, and I met him at his office and told him what I wanted to do. He hipped me to a few things I did not know. Even though our apartment was in my name, I couldn't just kick my husband out. If I left with him there, I could be accused of abandonment, and he could stay there. And if he didn't pay rent, which he couldn't afford a loan, guess whose credit would get further fucked up. Thanks to my futuristic vision, I came up with a plan. I had a talk with myself that mapped it all out. I had no reference points, nobody to talk with, nobody to call. My parents were with me, but that was only emotional support. I couldn't go to them for what to do. They had never been through anything like this. My friend Lisa was a great support, but this was my mess. Besides, I've always been a good plan hatcher. My first step was to get him out of the apartment. The following morning after he left for work, I met with the property management at my apartment complex and told them what was going on and that I was moving. I knew they would hassle me about breaking the lease in the middle of the term, but I told them, I'm having a domestic violence problem, and if anything happens to me, I'm naming you in a lawsuit. You have enough apartments in here. You must make one of them available for me. I only need a one bedroom. They immediately found me an apartment. This was really a no lose situation. After all, I was still renting from them. The next thing I had to do was figure out how to get rid of his stuff because I knew he wasn't going to leave. When I first approached him about leaving, he said, well, you can move out if you want. I'm not leaving, but I do want a divorce. And I told him, fuck you, motherfucker. I want a divorce too. I don't blame him for not wanting to leave. Hell, this was a really nice apartment with a Manhattan view and everything. It was the best he ever lived. But the problem was we were paying about $1,300 a month and the apartment was in my name. He couldn't afford it by himself. And I was just getting my credit together. I did not want to leave him with anything to ruin my name. After meeting with property management, I called a professional moving company, one of those big ones. I knew not to pack his stuff myself, and if anything was broken or missing, he could say I did it. I got some professionals who were insured. They would be responsible for everything and vouch that I didn't touch his stuff. I told them that I was going through a messy divorce and that I needed his stuff moved out without any problems, and I needed them to keep good records or I would sue. The next morning he left for work around seven o'clock. Father and son movers were waiting around the corner for me to call as instructed. I had Skeletor and Lisa sitting around the corner behind the movers. I needed all eyes on the movers as I packed my own stuff. When he left at 7 o'clock, the movers were there in minutes, and me and Lisa were like Lucy and Ethel packing up my shit while four workers were packing up his. I had already arranged for his stuff to go to a storage place. I gave him everything we collected as a couple, including the gifts that people gave us for the wedding. And I instructed the movers to put it all in a storage room that I had reserved for him. I'm glad I had the movers to verify everything because that motherfucker actually accused me of stealing his Sony Trinitron in the divorce papers. I made sure I had a stack of money because you know that movers want cash. And they got paid handsomely. I was a nervous wreck the whole time, smoking cigarette after cigarette. The apartment looked totally lived in prior to him leaving in the morning. But by the time he got home at 6 in the evening, there was a note that I left with the doorman, who only knew us as Wendy from the radio and her husband, a happily married couple, and a key to his storage room. I made sure to put the note inside of a sealed envelope because I didn't want to be accused of embarrassing him. The note basically read, fuck you, I have moved. You have 30 days to get your shit out of storage. I paid for 1 month in the storage unit because I didn't want to be countersued for something fucked up. I thought of everything. Lisa had never been through this, so while they were there for me and very supportive, they couldn't offer much advice. But I had my futuristic vision. I know when he got that note, he was totally pissed. He didn't know what to do and didn't know where I went. I guess he thought this young, dumb girl would be running back to mommy and daddy. He kept sending notes to my parents' house via his Manhattan attorney. The notes would get sent back with a note that read, she does not live here. I checked into the Marriott in Times Square, right down the street from Kiss. My apartment was ready, but I was scared to go there. Scared of what? I don't know. It was a fear that I can't explain. I guess I was scared of the repercussions. I did what I had to do, but I knew that there would be consequences, things I would have to deal with on my own. I didn't invite Skell and Lisa to the hotel to sit around slapping high fives and laughing about moving him out. Yeah, I played you, motherfucker. But what are you going to do? Follow me? If he did decide to follow me home, he would have been following right to the Marriott. I stayed there for a week, ordered great meals from room service, and had plenty of time to think. I did eventually move into my apartment, which was ready when I moved him out. And he eventually found out where I lived by having me followed. That was easy because we still worked together. The Monday after the big move, I went to work and told Vinny and Charles Warfield, his boss, exactly what I did. They made sure he stayed away from my side of the building, and there was a lock inside of the studio. He never physically approached me at work. But the workplace had become increasingly difficult for me. Robert started talking shit about me at the station. I was even pulled aside by one of the bosses and asked if I could continue to work with him because if I couldn't, they would let him go. He had whispered to coworkers things like he had tricked me and bought me a cubic zirconia for an engagement ring. He and I both knew the truth, that I picked out the damn CZ myself. I knew he couldn't afford a real diamond, and no, I was not walking around with a fifth of a carat on my finger. But even with the bad mouthing, I didn't want him fired. I knew what he was making, and I was not trying to strip anybody of their livelihood. All I wanted was a smooth transition. And at that point, I hadn't been served with divorce papers, and my divorce attorney was just getting everything together to serve him. The one who served first, my attorney told me, would have the advantage. One day I walked into work and there was a white guy waiting for me at the front desk. That wasn't unusual because there was always somebody there trying to give the jocks free stuff. This guy had a couple of sneaker boxes in a Modell's bag. I thought it was free sneakers. Hi, Wendy? Yeah, I said. I'm Pete from Modell's. And he hands me the bag with the sneaker boxes. And he left. When I opened the boxes, they were filled with bricks and divorce papers. It was so slick, all I could say was, ooh, you got that off. I had just gone to the bathroom to take care of my habit and was all excited about opening these gifts, and pow, I get hit with divorce papers. Pretty clever. In his papers, in addition to accusing me of stealing his Sony Trinitron, he also was looking for alimony money to be able to maintain the lifestyle to which I am accustomed. He was asking to be taken care of, a man who was 11 years older than me. The reason for divorce was irreconcilable differences. My countersuit was fair. I didn't ask for a thing. The only thing I wanted was an annulment to say this thing never happened. But in New Jersey, you could not be granted an annulment if the marriage was consummated. I just wanted to get it over with as simply and quickly as possible. But this fool was trying to push to have the divorce hearing in New York where he stood a better chance of getting money. This was a 5-month marriage with no kids and no property. He was 11 years my senior and spit in my face, and all I was thinking, let it go, man. Why are you fighting? This 5-month marriage took about a year and a half to dissolve. What finally happened was that he ran out of money. He couldn't pay his New York attorney. I found out because during a meeting between my attorney and his told mine that he was not handling the case anymore because my husband had not paid him. And while he didn't get any money, my attorney certainly got his, being hit off for a year and a half for a divorce that should have been an open and shut case. But I didn't mind spending a dime because in addition to getting legal advice from my attorney, he also gave me plenty of life lessons and financial advice. He told me, you know, Wendy, you really ought to look at investing all of this money you're making. And he connected me with a buddy of his at a major investment company. I actually look forward to meeting with my attorney because he would spend most of the time just talking. We seemed to talk about everything but my simpleton husband. So after his attorney stopped representing him, we were able to get a court date in New Jersey. I showed up with my attorney and my sister, who was still being very conservative, but I pulled her along anyway. I had the attitude that I was ready for the rest of my life, but I was still scared. The divorce happened the way it should have, a year and a half too late. I signed the papers and it was over. He never showed up. So for people who think you need 2 signatures on divorce papers to get divorced, you don't. People who think they don't happen because a party is unwilling, I'm here to tell you that they do happen. People who think they need this whole corral of friends and family, no, you don't. You can go by yourself. And always, even if you live a rock and roll lifestyle, make sure you have at least one conservative outfit, a business suit, or conservative dress in your wardrobe. This dummy had the nerve to mention my rock and roll lifestyle in his divorce papers. He said I was coming in consistently at 3 in the morning, but anybody who took time to know what I did for a living would understand why. But why didn't he point to the real deal? My cocaine addiction. I guess he knew, like I did, that my habit was not the reason for our problems. In fact, my habit didn't seem to bother him much at all. In court, I represented the opposite of what he said I was. I had on my conservative outfit and conservative hair. I had the look of a sensible woman, just in case he decided to kick in the door and represent himself at the last minute. And trust me, Brother Man knew how to lay it down if he had to. People actually bought his bullshit. Hell, I did. He would have had me looking like this wild rock and roll chick who drank and hung out till all hours of the night. Fortunately, he never came, and the divorce was done. Finally, lickety split. I even made sure that I got rid of his name. I didn't want to be Mrs. So and so ever again. I still have the divorce documents. They give me chuckles. So my 5-month marriage was over. He didn't get a dime. And well, I did get something out of it, the ring. I never gave it back. I wanted to keep it. I still have it. It serves as a joke and a reminder of how real I always kept it with myself and others.